What's going on, everybody? So I'm sure all of you have a favorite band of yours, probably multiple favorite bands, and I'm sure you've held it near and dear to your heart that these bands are authentic for the music. They mean well. Everything they do is pure and simply for artistic and creative measure. Well, I got news for you. All of that is completely false, and I can prove it. Hey, real quick, before I jump into this video, if you're interested in private guitar instruction with yours truly online, my email is in the link in the description below. Just shoot me an email, state your case, and I will get back to you. Also, don't forget to sign up for my free monthly newsletter, free written guitar lesson every month, as well as access to all of my tabs. Link in the description and pinned comment as well. Back to the video. Now, I want to start out by telling you a story before I actually get into the official narrative of the video, and I'm going to start the story with my very super rare vintage record collection. Now, I don't know how many young people watch my videos. I think it's actually a lot of more Gen X and boomers, to be honest with you. So you probably know what this is. And maybe I'm low-key a boomer at heart. First one is obviously this record by the band Black Flag called Slip It In. Now, I'm not going to really... You could not come up with an album cover like this today, which is kind of ironic. One of my favorite frontmen of all time, Henry Rollins. I even have the Black Flag tattoo, just like he had, which is, I don't know, I was like 17 when I got it. You know, you want the same one as your favorite band, etc. Funny story about this tattoo, sidebar here, is I met Henry Rollins at the gym one time in Nashville, and we talked for, maybe like 10, 20 minutes, and super cool guy, and very glad to have actually been able to meet him. Next one, No Effects. This is an original. These are all originals, by the way. Original press, okay? White Trash, Two Hebes and a Bean. Also another album you could not come out with in today's time without it being overly offensive. But then again, Sabrina Carpenter has come out with, obviously, the Spinal Tap album cover of the year, basically.
Ian, you put a greased, naked woman on all fours with a dog collar around her neck and a leash. And a man's arm extended out up to here, holding on to the leash and pushing a black glove in her face to sniff it. You don't find that offensive?
No,
you don't find that sexist?
This is 1982.
Another one, we have Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables. This is also a first press, this is an original. That's literally the name of the album, Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables. Here's another one. This one I got out of my buddy's garage. Can you believe that? He didn't even know what he had. He sold it to me for $10. This is the original Kill 'Em All. Why do I bring this to your attention today? Well, it's because when I was growing up, to me, these bands, other than Metallica, I saw them as pure to their craft, pure to their art form, never selling out their music, never selling out anything. Then as I got older, I took a trip to Hot Topic. Now, for those of you that, I'm sure most people watching the video know that store, but it is a store that essentially sells music merchandise from all bands, all genres, etc. You could find Metallica there. You could probably find Minor Threat and Black Flag there. You could find definitely the Misfits, definitely Nirvana. We'll get into that in a second. And, this was kind of the first time in my life when I explored Hot Topic that I had a gut feeling inside of me that all of a sudden made me feel like everything I'm doing is not as rebellious as I actually thought. Not as pure as I actually thought. Now, I find it interesting that a lot of these artists, particularly in the punk rock genre, as listed here, really sold the dream of never selling out. How that is a horrible thing. Getting corporate is a terrible thing for music, as we will never do that. A lot of those bands even said stuff like that. There was like literally feuds of bands calling each other sellouts, especially in the 80s and the 90s. Not so much anymore because everybody is a sellout now. Literally, it's impossible to basically not be a sellout in the streaming era. So let's go back to bare bones of what does this word sellout actually mean? And what does it mean to not be a sellout? Let's discuss back during the times of the hardcore punk scene. This would have been considered to be the purest form of the genre of punk music. The bands that came before would have been bands such as the Ramones, the Sex Pistols, the Clash. Actually, the original Misfits would have come out in the 70s during this time. And I could go on from there, but those are really kind of, some of the heavy hitters of the genre, right? A lot of the CBGBs kind of bands, a lot of the UK bands where it's argued that punk actually originated from. And these bands, unlike the ones that would come after them, actually achieved commercial success. Punk rock music starting in the DIY scene. All the bands, for the most part, were not signed to labels, or they were signed to maybe a super indie label at the time, and really only push it a handful of records out, right? It was not a big deal to be pushing thousands of records at a time. Then come the Sex Pistols during this time, which pretty much changed the entire landscape for the genre by making it essentially mainstream. And as much as they sold being counterculture and against the mainstream, they were in fact mainstream, at least for 3 years of their life, from 1977 to 1980. Then comes the next wave of the genre of music. This is what we would call hardcore punk. And hence the name hardcore punk. You can bet that these bands were making no money. And when I say they were making no money, that is literally true, because most of the members literally were working at a gas station or something to the effect and playing music on the side.
So I hit the streets and pursued the minimum wage jobs that I'd had all through high school. And that was, for me, that was me in the late 70s. The last straight job I had was 1981. Head manager of a Haagen-Dazs in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. on Wisconsin Avenue at the intersection of Wisconsin and O Street, making $3.75 an hour, $4 an hour, something like that. And I looked at my life and realized this is probably about as good as it's going to get for me. And then I got a very lucky break, because at that same time I was very frustrated. I said, well, this is going to be a very tough life. It's going to be a life of a lot of standing on my feet, a lot of work, taking it from other people, and having very little to show for it by Friday evening. Black Flag, the famous band, who was friends of mine, they played in New York. I was in Washington. I took a ride up to go see them because they weren't coming down to my town. I jumped on stage and sang with them that night. They called me a few days later at the ice cream store and said, we're looking for a singer and we're holding auditions. You want to crack at this? Because we saw you on stage the other night. You're pretty wild.
And truly, these artists were pretty pure to the genre, at least at the time. Bands that came out of this time would have been bands like Minor Threat, Black Flag, Dead Kennedys, who were also borderline coming out in the 70s actually, but they were more considered along the lines of hardcore punk. These bands were literally playing clubs, maybe to a few hundred people at the max, and albums like the Black Flag one that I just showed you would have actually only sold maybe 30,000 copies total at the time. And that was considered big numbers for a band like that then. And the reason that these records were so rare, and the fact that having an original press actually means something, is because they literally did not press more than probably 30,000 copies of that record at the time. There was not a demand for it, and most of these bands would not have been able to sell any more than the ones that they'd actually pressed out. Of course, now, these have all become legacy bands, and actually most of them are very well known, especially the Misfits and the Dead Kennedys and Ramones, etc. And why is this the case? This music was never popular. It was not cool to like it. Especially if you were living around that time in the 80s, it would have been all about big hair and metal, specifically Ozzy, Van Halen, Quiet Riot. The list goes on. Well, then comes the birth of a magical store. It's called Hot Topic. And with Hot Topic comes the streaming era for music. All of a sudden this year, Black Flag is playing Coachella, and it's not even the same band. They shouldn't even call it Black Flag. And this kind of brings me to my point of selling out, okay? Every band wants to make money. I talk about making money so much on this channel from music, and I've literally said on this channel that you should never do anything musically in your career unless you're getting paid for it, even if it is $50, okay? Now, granted, you probably shouldn't even take $50, but I'm just saying as merit, you got to get paid for your craft. Now, all these bands sell you this dream of being pure and authentic and never selling out, yet the Misfits have to probably be the highest grossing band for merch sales of all time. When I was in high school, the amount of random girls that I would see wearing Misfits shirts to school and never even knew it was a band at all. They didn't even, not even like, oh, I know it's a band, I've never heard their music, like didn't know it is a band. Shows you how much these bands have, quote, sold out. Now, is there anything wrong with that? In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with it other than the fact that they've sold you basically a lie by saying, hey, we're authentic, we're pure, but hey, millions of dollars worth of merch sales. We are a brand now. We are a corporation. And this is the same with all these guys that preach never selling out. I can go buy your shirt in Hot Topic. Now, the one record I showed you, obviously, that I think are actually very satisfied with selling out is Metallica. I don't think they have any issues with making money off their music, and honestly, I respect them for that. I have, no issues. They never tried to say they're not selling out, and to them, I guess I would give them credit for just being authentic about it, in that case. I think it's a little disingenuous to the bands that have claimed to be so pure and authentic to then go and sell their merch in Hot Topic and make probably what is millions of dollars at this point and become rich, especially for those that own the rights to the name, which for many of you know, for the Misfits, has been a war between Glenn Danzig and Jerry Only for years and years and even decades at this point. And then, of course, we have the tribute shows that come from these bands that literally nobody wanted to see back in the 80s, like the Misfits. And they're selling tickets for over $200 a ticket. The Misfits are. Nobody wanted to see this band in the 80s when they came out, especially with Glenn Danzig. Now, I actually had the privilege to see Michael Graves solo almost a decade ago at a small club, and I got to meet him. Very nice guy, and I guess people would, real Misfits fans are gonna hate me saying this, but I actually liked his version of the band, I think, the best, even more so than Glenn Danzig. But obviously Glenn Danzig made the legacy for the Misfits, right? And obviously Glenn Danzig had a successful career of his own on top of this, which kind of attributes to them having a bigger name to sell these tickets. But literally, as I said, nobody wanted to see this band in the 80s. No one even knew who they were. Okay, they were an underground punk band playing clubs. You can go find old footage of them in the clubs. No one's there. I mean, people are there, but it's like, dude, you're not playing in stadiums. Now they're playing stadiums, doing the least punk rock thing possible. So in my opinion, it just comes to something where you just have to own what you're doing. Hey, if you want to sell out, just say, hey, I like money. There's nothing wrong with saying that. But when you say you hate money and then you go make money, millions of dollars, it's a little bit disingenuous. Now that brings me to Black Flag, okay, another punk band. One of probably my favorite of all of the groups that I've forementioned here. I want to first give an out here to Henry Rollins because I think he is a very interesting guy in general, and he kind of just made the best of his career in Hollywood in general. He didn't just tie himself to being in Black Flag in the 80s. He eventually went to form his own band, then started doing these public speaking gigs, eventually acting, and now he's just kind of a celebrity. He's been in a bunch of movies, was on Sons of Anarchy, and he's kind of known for a lot of different things now. So I think he kind of has an out on this thing because I don't think he ever claimed to, not be selling out. And I actually think out of every one of these bands that he kind of did remain the most authentic to what he actually wanted to do with his life. Greg Ginn is the only remaining original member of the band. He's a guitar player. He's also the owner of SST Records from the 80s, which printed out all the, Black Flag records and all of that. Greg Ginn is in his late 60s now. I think he's almost 70, if not 70 years old. And he has hired a bunch of 20-year-olds to play in his band and call it Black Flag. And they're playing Coachella. So, in my opinion, now I can respect the fact that this man has tried to keep, kind of what he has to his name going for his whole career to, remain constant in having a music career. But it is incredibly disingenuous to call yourself Black Flag and then basically have the Disney Channel version of Black Flag as the members of your band. And it is, in my opinion, the definition of selling out. And I think to all these bands that sell the purity of never selling out, it is all a facade, because it is, at the end of the day, a sale. You sell, not selling out. It is still someone buying into your thing. A true non-sellout would be someone that chooses to make no money ever off their music, which is also completely kind of ridiculous, unless you're a hobbyist, of course. But if you are selling a band / a brand / what is actually a corporation, you are technically selling out. That is the definition. Let's use one more band as this example here. Rage Against the Machine. Tom Morello, more like raging for the machine, as he is one of the biggest corporate rock stars of all time. Literally, I reluctantly just bought his Neural DSP amp sim, and I didn't buy it because I'm a fan of Tom Morello, okay? I bought it because I thought it sounded good at first, and then I bought it. I kind of regret it now. I'm not going to lie about that, but I gave this man my money. This guy's got his name stamped over so many things that generate revenue, yet the man claims that he doesn't want any money. He also claims that record labels are evil. He claims that the music industry is evil. He claims that corporate America is evil. Yet he is one of the most corporate people in the entire music industry, constantly generating revenue and bringing in money.
International state capitalist machinery that tries to make you just a mindless cog and to, you know, have not to think critically and never to confront the system, but just to kind of behave and look forward to the weekend and the next 6-pack of beer.
I just find it disingenuous. That's all. And also, it has nothing to do with his beliefs or anything like that. I'm not going to bring that into this video. I actually was a huge fan of Rage Against the Machine at one point in my life. I would almost venture to say when I was a teenager that they probably were my favorite band at one point. But over the years, I can't help but feel I've had a sour taste put in my mouth, particularly by Tom Morello specifically, as the individual, not even just his band. But as an individual, I feel like Tom Morello has put a sour taste in my mouth for his own band. And, you know, like, we don't even need to talk about his guitar playing, because I've never really... His guitar playing is... Let's not even talk about that. Look, I make videos of Kirk Hammett, but let's be honest here. You don't even want me to make a video on Tom Morello's guitar playing. Maybe I should. Let me know in the comments. These bands sell you... they sell you the dream of not being a sellout, yet at the end of the day, people got to eat. So I want to encourage everybody through this video that no matter what you're sold, you got to eat. You should never do anything for free in this music industry. You got to get paid for your craft. You got to get paid for your art. And I think it's disingenuous for people that are on kind of a higher platform to sell that to younger people especially, and put these things in their mind that are very disingenuous, in my opinion, that don't actually apply to the real world and reality, such as just getting paid for your craft, because the truth of the matter is that they are getting paid off of selling you that facade. So, with that being said, what are your thoughts on this video? Maybe you don't even know some of the bands that I mentioned. I don't know. I don't know how popular this hardcore punk music actually is, but I do find it to be very non-punk. And frankly, I have completely left that community over the years because I kind of felt this way about it the whole time. I'm like, man, you guys really are kind of all like lying to yourselves, is what I felt like. But I don't know. How do you feel about this? Let me know in the comments. And you know, never be a pushover in the music industry, and get paid for your craft. You know, stick up for yourself, and you will succeed. So thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to sign up for the free monthly newsletter. I am going to be forming a little online community here very soon, and I'll have details for that. And I'll see you on the next one.